Welcome back to the hottest show in the galaxy. I love that. It's the Karen Hunter Show. We're here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. And it's been a kind of trying weekend coming off of the horrific week last week. And then Saturday waking up to 11 souls being taken from this earth by, I want to say just pure evil, but evil that was stoked. But this man makes me smile. I was coming in today. I parked on 6th Avenue, got out of my car, I looked over, and I saw him, and I stood and I was staring at him. And he didn't know who I was. He just waved, smiled, and I walked on by. He didn't even know me, but that's the kind of man he is. And I was happy when I heard he was coming in because I watched him. You know, he gives them the business. You know, he gives them the business. But the where he really was powerful recently, Aretha Franklin's funeral, he gave what I thought was no one else needed to talk after him. Unfortunately, too many people did, but that's another story for another day. Let me welcome to the show, Judge Greg Mathis.
Thank you. And yes, indeed, I did see you. And when I finished my hot dog, I got up. I said, where are those ladies? I was going to take a picture. Offer a picture.
Yeah,
I always offer pictures.
It's very
people.
Nice. I was like, look at this, Judge. I'm not even going to bother him. You sitting chatting with a gentleman. I was like, okay, all right. I was going to go up to you and say, I'll see you later on the show and introduce myself, but you were engrossed and you just looked up and said hello, and I appreciated that because that says something about your character.
Thank you.
You know, when you came in, you wanted to make sure you spoke to everyone. We live in some very volatile, strange, uncivilized times,
Yep.
and just the kindness of a smile and a hello is sometimes all that somebody needs to get through their day.
I got to do it somewhere because I don't do it much on television. When they disrespect me, I have to go in on them. So outside of that, I'm a nice, kind, gentle soul.
But the bench, being on the bench, doing that, and where we are right now, there's a lot of bleed over, right? Are you seeing more hostility even in?
Absolutely, I see the division. I see, quite frankly, I see the white supremacy. And I check it time I see it. It's almost as if I enjoy them coming on so I can whip them up a little bit, particularly in exchanging intelligence or doing an exchange that requires intelligence. And certainly by white supremacy is by definition ignorance. So ignorance meets, I hope I'm a little intelligent on there.
Let's talk about that because, you know, there are narratives about us, you know, 400 years worth of narratives about who we are. I say, like, black people are the chapstick of the world. You know, we smooth over the cracks. We know how to make chitlins into a delicacy. It's like it's what we do, right? So when I think about your upbringing and your trials as a young man, if you were, you know, a statistic, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now because you'd have been swept up, but it didn't happen. But you did follow a path that so many young people do.
And let me say, and my ability to overcome that, and we'll get into that, is really based on us as a people. And you made reference to it, and I put it as we are the greatest people in the history of civilization, because no group of people have come so far in such a short time as any other group. We just exited slavery a little over 100 or so years ago, and then we were dealt with the lack of the right to vote. 75% of us were in poverty before the Civil Rights Act. We only had less than 1,000 elected officials prior to the Voting Rights Act, and it was those two pieces of legislation allowed us to enter in the mainstream economic flow. Still, unfortunately, impoverished in many of our communities. And then secondly, that right to vote led to us to the presidency. And there's no group of people in history who has ever done that.
But what if the people, because I get a lot of these callers that say, the vote doesn't matter. We haven't seen anything. I vote when you vote and whatever. What's changed? And we even had a black president and nothing's changed.
Well, first of all, you have to educate yourself on the effects and the purpose of voting, and the effects more importantly, and that is politicians or public policy makers determine who gets what. That's the real essence of what politics is. Dividing up the world, dividing up the country, dividing up your state, dividing up your city, dividing up your community, dividing the resources up. So when we don't vote, number one, the census says, well, there are not as many people there, or the politicians say, well, there's not as many people there paying attention because they're not voting. So while they're not paying attention, let's pick their pocket and let's
redirect their water.
There you go. There you're talking. Or correct, or divide the resources up at a disproportionate amount. We'll give more money to our schools because the folks in Detroit or in New York or Brooklyn aren't voting and they won't even notice. Or we'll repair the roads and the sidewalks in our neighborhood, or we'll provide job training outside of the major cities. We'll do it in the rural areas where we think our interest lies. So it's really about voting your interests. And if you don't care much about yourself and about your community, well, that says something about you. And not voting is a display of lack of concern or lack of interest in yourself and your community.
Just want that to sit for a second. 866-801-8255. We're talking with Judge Mathis. He's in the house. Briefly, because I've heard the story. For those who are living in a cave somewhere, who aren't familiar with your rise to the bench. I think they came
out of the caves a few hundred years ago, or maybe tens of thousands. Go ahead.
I'm not going there with you.
No, you scared?
No, very much not. But I don't want to waste my time with you talking about that history. 17 years old, you were arrested. Ended up in juvenile.
Not juvenile. I was tried as an adult.
They tried you as an adult at 17. How did you understand or comprehend what that meant?
Oh,
what did you do, by the way?
Oh yeah, that one was carrying a gun, and a little something to it. But I was pled guilty to carrying a gun, and so, quite frankly, it wasn't anything I wasn't used to. I had been locked up in juvenile several times. Everybody around me in the housing projects I grew up in were in and out of jail, in and out of juvenile, in and out of prison. So it wasn't something, as is the case today, that was so strange. It wasn't strange at all. It was more commonplace. How did I feel? I felt like I was following the pattern of all the other young people I knew and all the adults who had a record. In fact, it was a badge of honor. It was a badge of honor to go to jail and say I did 11 months. That when you come out, you're tougher, you get more respect, etc.
So your mother came to visit you, and she told you that she had cancer.
This is the way she put it. She said, Gregory, you've embarrassed me in front of the community all your life. You've embarrassed me in the neighborhood, rather, all your life. You've embarrassed me at school all of your life. You've embarrassed me at church all of your life. Just left the doctor yesterday, and he says, I'm going to die. Would you please turn your life around before I die? That put me on the fast track to the GED, to affirmative action, college opportunity. That's why I'm such strongly in favor of that. Here I am, 6 months out of jail with a GED. I was admitted to a major university, Eastern Michigan University. 3 months later, she died after I entered college. But
she got to see you go to college.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, you think just that beautiful woman telling you that day turned you completely around. And I think about the millions of young kids who just, looking for that word. How do we reach them?
Well, first of all, we have to wake them up, hit them upside the head. I say crack their heads open. And the way we do that is bring them the knowledge of themselves, bring them the knowledge of history so that they'll know what they're facing. A lot of times there's so much hopelessness and despair in our community because we really don't know how to overcome it, and we really haven't seen many people or touched many people that have overcame. And so That's why I use my journey as an example to show brothers and sisters, but more importantly, black men, black youth, how they can fight back. And I began my college career. I was engaged in immediately campus activism, because when I got there, I saw the distinction. I had grown up, as many of us do, in abject poverty and crime and drug-infested neighborhoods. When I went there to college, everybody had money. Everybody was smiling and having fun. I hadn't seen so many people smiling in my life. I guess they had a lot to smile about, and where I came from, they didn't. So that contrast immediately said something's wrong with this picture. And I began to educate myself about history and about the modern times, and that informed me on how to overcome, and that is first fighting back and empowering yourself, and not letting anybody, and I got to talk plain as I do. I'm even more plain when I'm off television. Not letting anybody punk you out. Society punk you out. Black men in particular, we have this super macho attitude. We're on the street talking about we want our respect. But then we scared of white folks. You ask them to go down to train in skilled trades, or they come back, them white folks don't want me there. Then no, they don't. So
and
right. It's about competition. And you have brothers from the streets have more instincts, survival instincts, one, and more aggression, two, because one, you've had to survive, dodge the police most of your life, dodge the enemies. If you're in the game, you're playing the game most of the day and night. And so it's a lot easier when you get to college or whether it's community college.
Than the streets of Detroit.
There's no question about it. It was like a fairyland when I left Detroit and went there. But the other point there is escaping the environment. That's a big part of it. And that's why 70% of our brothers who come home from captivity, they return within a year, because they're going right back to the same environment with the same peer pressure. And peer pressure is probably the most culpable thing in impoverished communities. It's either you're prey or you're a predator. Either you're going to get robbed or whatever the case.
Doing the robbing.
Yeah. And so
it's very black and white.
Correct. And so getting out of that, escaping that is what I was able to do. 6 months later, I was able to leave the hood and go to college.
Change of venue.
Exactly. And although I did a little lightweight hustling, it was nothing that would have given me any real
what
time.
Was being done on the campuses.
Well, you know what they do on college.
They don't roll up on the college campuses with the guns out.
Right. So,
they bet not.
Getting out that environment, empowering yourself with some form of education, and then the will to fight back and not punk out.
Don't punk out. Judge Mathis.
Tough guy.
Judge Greg Mathis, you can follow him at that. Are you active on the social media?
Somewhat.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
All right. Judge Greg Mathis is in the house. Flint, during your eulogy, I'm going to say that, of Aretha Franklin, and you made me see her differently, the back and forth, that she could call you and talk to you about things that were going on in the world. I never knew Aretha was connected like that. And then I'm reading about her civil rights, Angela Davis and the bail, and we get one image of somebody based on what the media puts out, and she seemed to be extremely private.
Very.
Y'all are the same birth sign too. You probably connected around that. I don't want to get into that. I think so.
No, I didn't know that.
All right.
Okay.
So she inspired you to.
I did go to every birthday party. I didn't know. I didn't recognize.
All right, maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're probably right, because it was spring or so.
Yeah. So she wanted you to do something about Flint. Yeah. She called you.
We go back a long ways to when I worked for the mayor of Detroit, and she was icon in Detroit, and the mayor made sure we looked out for her. Then I worked with Reverend Jackson. They were close all the way from back in Dr. King days, when she would go around the country singing and supporting the struggle. And so I began a relationship with her more so when I came to television, and she was proud and would call me and wanted me to use my platform to advance our folks like she did. And I was already doing that on outside of television. She wanted me to bring it to television, in which I have. And then we would talk every month, and it would always typically be about politics, whether it was what Reverend Jackson and Al Sharpton was doing, which we were both supportive and involved with. I'm chairman of the Rainbow Push. And then it would be about what's going on, period. She watched MSNBC all day, CNN, people wouldn't believe that about Aretha. They wouldn't imagine that. And so on this conversation, indeed, it was the last conversation we ever had. The state of Michigan had stopped distributing the free water to the people they poisoned in Flint, Michigan. Last 2 years, they were rebuilding the pipes. Less than half have been rebuilt, yet the state of Michigan says you all can resume drinking the water, and we're going to stop giving you free water. So she and I were discussing that, and she said, Greg, you got to get back up there, because I had gone up in 16 and did a lot of work. And I said, well, I don't know, Reed. Last time I went up there, the media there, local media, said I was coming to town and causing trouble. She said, well, you're from Detroit. What you scared of? Yeah, I guess you're right. She said, well, get on up there and sock it to her. That's right. She said, you ain't no punk. Said, you talk tough. You from Detroit? Get on up there then. And so November 1st, this Thursday, we're doing a water caravan. We have semi-trucks going, and we have 30 to 50, it's adding on by the hour, cars with water going to Flint, and we're going to have a big rally to challenge the state and any other
water's
officials.
Still poisoned.
There's no question
it's
about
October
it.
29th. The water's, it's been years.
Yep.
Poisoned water.
Yep.
Human beings in America.
Legionnaire's disease they're dying of.
Lead.
Walking with rashes all over their bodies, unable to bathe in the water right now. And we worry about, who is it? ISIS and Al-Qaeda poisoning our water.
Come on. We're doing it.
We don't have to wait on now.
So what? It's the most frustrating thing, again, that I have to argue with people about voting, right? And I saw it in Ferguson. Less than 17% of the people showed up to vote after Mike Brown was murdered. And you want to say voting doesn't matter. Can we try 100% turnout? Let's see what happens if 100% of us who are registered and eligible to vote actually vote. Let's see, with a purpose.
And I assure you, the people of Flint would not have been poisoned had the black folks in Michigan voted during the last gubernatorial election where this right-wing Republican was elected,
Mm-hmm.
Snyder. We black folks voted about 15 to 20%. I think it was 17, 18%. 100,000 more votes. We would have a Democratic governor who we would have the leverage to fight against because they need our vote.
Talk about that for a second. Coleman Young, first African-American.
Whom I worked for.
Right, mayor, Detroit. People say both parties are the same.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to know that it's not true, even though I don't get caught up in the partisan game. And then, the Democrats are soft; they're punks, right? How do you respond to that, Judge Mathis?
I have a saying, and people are not always open to it or agreeable, but the saying I have is the Republicans are like vicious wolves, and Democrats are like sneaky fox, but they're both from the dog family. However, so we shouldn't be beholden to anyone other than our own self-interest. And if the Republican Party said they were in favor of affirmative action, major job program, clamping down on police injustice, health care, and other things that represent our interests as a people, that being the folks I care about most, black and poor, then I would vote Republican. But they don't. In fact, we are perhaps the most enlightened group of people in politics and perhaps in America's history. We were Republicans until the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act, when the Republican Party came against the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. We switched in droves over to the Democratic Party. No, I think it was under Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he came with the New Deal that benefited poor and African Americans, and his wife was very protective, Eleanor Roosevelt.
She was with Mary Bethune,
mm-hmm.
right? They were friends, but the New Deal actually exempted people who were farm workers and domestic workers. So until 1970, from 1940s to 1970s, we were left out of all of that. So it was the rhetoric that we bought into. And I think more and more of us need to be more vigilant in reading the fine print.
Yep, and that's what we were saying earlier. You got to inform yourself. And so certainly by the 70s and the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, we switched over to those who were representing our interests best. And that's what I say today. Hey, if they flip, we flip. But until then, we have to go where our interest lies.
How do we do a better job, Judge Mathis, of holding people accountable? Because I think that seems to be the big disconnect, that, we vote people in and then they take us for granted. We vote them in numbers, 96%. We'll show up. Because we show up, like you said, we more so sophisticated than anybody else out there, group wise, and then people don't, pay us back, for our vote.
Well, one of the things I've learned in my career in public service and politics was that unless you keep them. Unless they fear you, people either love or fear you, quite frankly, and a lot of their emotion is based on that. So a lot of the elected officials who put in office, they don't necessarily love you. So you got to make them fear us. And how do you make them fear you? Well, you call, you write, you email in this stage in life, and protest outside their office if necessary. We've protested outside of Snyder's home, the governor. And
I said I would leave a gallon of dirty water on his doorstep every single day.
That's a good point. But what we did do made a difference. And so that's what I suggest. You agitate. And then if that doesn't work, then you must get a little more aggressive. And so that's why I've been associated with Rainbow Push and Reverend Jackson and others, because they know how to fight back. They protest. And we must use our power and leverage to hold folks accountable.
We're talking with Judge Mathis. We even need to hold our leaders accountable, too.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the phones. Can we take a couple of calls? Judge Mathis is in the house. Let's go. I'm not gonna listen. I've come full circle on a lot of people, and I feel like allies are better when they can be held accountable. Right? Just because they have access, now the access has to mean benefits for us, not just them.
I agree totally.
All right,
we're together on that.
Yeah. Let's go to Joe in Cleveland. You're on with Judge Mathis. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show.
Thank you. And I got to say, Honorable Judge Mathis, I sure appreciate this show. I listen to it as often as I can, or I tape it. One question I would like to ask, though. How is it, are they making the people of Michigan pay their water bills if that water is poison? And can't they just say, stop, turn it off, I don't want any water in my house?
Well, they're shutting it off. So, 2 years ago, I had a legal forum. I had some of the top lawyers in the country, particularly of our community, Willie Gary and others, came to answer the questions. One of the things they were most concerned, the water department was still charging them. So at that time, we fought until that policy was changed, and they weren't charging them, but it was only for a limited time, and that time has expired. Now they're back to the same old tricks. They're charging the people, and they're shutting the water off if you don't pay for the poison. And we're going back to either negotiate or agitate to make sure that policy is turned around. We have a committee of lawyers now from the National Bar Association, the African American Lawyer Association, that we're fighting on that.
And let me just thank you, Joe, for your call and for the question. Let me thank you, Judge Mathis, because a lot of people have platforms and they talk a lot. but you're actually doing things. And a lot of the stuff that you do is under the radar. It's not like you're going around, banging a gong. And I'm pulling teeth to get you to talk about November 1st, which is good because you care so much about the people that the mission is more important than actually getting it out. You're here because you have to tell people where to go and what's happening on November 1st, but you rather do the work. I see that.
Yeah. MathisCommunityCenter.com. You can help us for what we're doing November 1st and beyond. We're collecting water. You can go to MathisCommunityCenter.com and they'll take you right to Amazon and you can order it and ship it directly to us. You don't have to do anything other than go to Amazon, purchase the water, and ship it.
And now they can go to smile.amazon.com because you get extra donations. I know that. Don't look at me. I'm just telling y'all. Smile.amazon.com. Purchase the water through his what is it? Mathis.
The website MathisCommunityCenter.com.
Mathis Community. We'll tweet it out. Make it easy for people. So follow us on Twitter at Karen Hunter. Also follow Judge Mathis at Judge Greg Mathis and follow SXM Urban View. We give all of the links out there. What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue doing what I do, and that is having a little fun on television, infusing a little social commentary and social justice. And then when I take that robe off, unlike a friend of ours, my hat won't make me feel like Superman.
You got a message for Kanye? Because you seem like you want to say something about Kanye.
I didn't say
Judge. I said Kanye. You know it's Kanye. What you want to say, Judge Mathis? Because y'all both from the Midwest.
I'll say this. Trump should be ashamed of himself of taking advantage of that young man. He should be ashamed. Okay. I know everyone wants me to come down on Kanye, but I just want Trump should not have did that.
Okay.
With the knowledge that he and many others have, with the knowledge that Kanye has
expressed
himself with his.
So he took advantage of a person that needed to be on his medication, and
I didn't say that.
No, I've said it. I said it. Karen Hunter said it, not Judge Mathis. I got you. Oh, will you come back? Your pleasure.
Oh, certainly.
All right. November 1st. Can we show up? Show up if you're in the area. Show up. It's going to be a rally in Flint. Is it? You're driving a caravan all the way
driving
through?
A caravan from the Mathis Community Center in Detroit, which is at 19300 Greenfield, or you can go back to the site. It'll tell you where we're at. Leave there at 10 a.m. Driving to Flint, an hour and a half away, with a big caravan of water. Then we're going to get there and rally and have some fun at the expense of the politicians who are not taking care of the people.
Amen. We're going to stay on that. Shout out to Karen Weaver, the mayor of Flint. She's
I love her. She's doing great things. She's doing her best.
She is. And we have to keep supporting. And I thank you again for being in the trenches. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
And thanks for waving to me. Made me smile.
Thank you.
Judge Mathis. You can check him out on TV. And, of course, go to MathisCommunityCenter.com.